Hey guys, Michael McJunkin here again with another Read Aloud video. This time, I'm gonna be reading aloud a book from one of the authors of my childhood, James Marshall. Today's story, George and Martha, tons of fun. So let us begin. One of the 5 stories about the best of friends. Story number 1, The Misunderstanding. George was practicing his handstands. "This calls for concentration," he said. Suddenly the doorbell rang. Ding dong. It was Martha. "I've come to chat," she said. "Not this afternoon," said George. "I want to be alone." "I hope Martha understands," said George. But Martha did not understand. Martha was offended. Martha was hurt. And Martha was mad. A few minutes later, George's telephone rang. It was Martha. "George," she said, "I never want to see you again," and she slammed down the receiver. "Oh dear," said George. Martha was mad all afternoon and evening. Finally, she got out her saxophone. "This'll calm me down." Soon Martha was having quite a bit of fun. In fact, she was having so much fun that she didn't even answer her telephone. "Oh dear," said George. "Martha must still be upset." But Martha had forgotten all about the misunderstanding. Story number 2, The Sweet Tooth. George had a sweet tooth. He just couldn't stop himself from eating sweets. "You know what they say about too much sugar?" said Martha. "Let's not discuss it," said George. Last night, George would raid the refrigerator to satisfy his sweet tooth. "You'll weigh a ton," said Martha. "Let's not discuss it," said George. "This calls for action." And she lit up a cigar. "Stop that," cried George. "You'll make yourself sick." "Let's not discuss it," said Martha. "You'll ruin your teeth," cried George. "We won't discuss it," said Martha. "Please," cried George. "You're ruining your health." "No discussion," said Martha. Martha began in a peculiar color. George couldn't stand it any longer, and he fell to his knees. "I'll do anything you say," he begged. "Will you cut down on your sweets?" "Will you cut down on your sweets?" said Martha. "I promise," said George, and Martha put out her cigar. Story number 3, The Photograph. One day Martha stepped into a photography booth. "I love to have my picture taken," she said. The camera. When Martha saw her photograph, she was thrilled. "I never looked prettier," she said. Story number 4, The Hypnotist. George was trying to hypnotize Martha. "Your eyes are getting heavy," said George. "I believe they are," said Martha. "You are getting sleepy," said George. "That's true." And in that moment, Martha seemed to have was sound asleep. "Success," whispered George. Ever so quietly, George tiptoed to the kitchen, where he kept his cookie jar. "Aha!" cried Martha. "Ugh." George was ashamed. He'd broken his promise. "Would you like a cookie?" he asked Martha. "Yes, I would," she said, and she ate them all. Now for the last story, The Special Gift. It was George's birthday, and Martha stopped by the photo shop to buy a gift. "He loves to read," Martha told the salesperson. On the way to George's house, Martha made a tricky game of hopscotch. And it definitely tricky for a hippo. George could hardly wait for his gift. "I can't stand the suspense," he said, but when Martha went to look for George's book, it wasn't there. "I'm waiting," said George. "What do I do?" said Martha to herself. I'm waiting, said George. Martha quickly decided to give George the photograph of herself. It's not much, she said. When George saw Martha's picture, he fell off the chair laughing. Well, said Martha, what's so funny? This is the best gift I've ever received, said George. It is, said Martha. Of course, said George. It's wonderful to have a friend who knows how to make you laugh. Martha decided to swallow her pride. She saw that the photograph was pretty funny after all. The end. Well, that was George and Martha. Tons of fun. Hope you guys enjoyed hearing this story, especially here by James Marshall, who, in a way, I really did like a couple of his stories as a kid. So, hope you guys enjoyed this read aloud, and I'll see you all next month. See you then.